I smoothed my dress for the 100th time as I stood outside the Caldwell mansion, trying to calm my racing heart. The engagement dinner was supposed to be a celebration, but something about Vivian Caldwell's overly polite voicemail inviting me had set me on edge. My name is Harper, and looking back, I should have trusted my instincts that evening. There you are, sweetheart. Ethan appeared at the door, pulling me into a warm embrace. His familiar cologne usually calmed me, but tonight it couldn't quite settle the butterflies in my stomach. Everyone's waiting in the dining room. I followed him through the marble foyer, my heels clicking against the floor like a countdown. Caldwell home always made me feel like I was walking through a museum, beautiful but untouchable. Vivian rose from her seat as we entered, her silk blouse probably worth more than my monthly rent. "Harper, darling," she said, air-kissing my cheeks. "That's an interesting choice of dress for tonight." I felt my cheeks burn. The dress I'd spent 2 weeks' salary on suddenly felt like something from a discount rack. "I think she looks beautiful," Ethan said, squeezing my hand. His father, Richard, barely looked up from his phone, offering only a curt nod. The first course arrived, something French I couldn't pronounce. Vivian took a delicate sip of wine before turning her razor-sharp attention my way. "So, Harper, tell us about your family's background." I realized I know so little about the Winslows. "Mom," Ethan warned quietly. "What?" "I'm simply getting to know our future daughter-in-law better." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "After all, we need to know what we're inheriting." The way she said it made my skin crawl. I straightened my spine, meeting her gaze. "My father built his business from nothing. He taught me the value of hard work and integrity." "How quaint," Vivian replied, her voice dripping with condescension. "Though I suppose some find that sort of thing admirable." That's when I saw it, the slight tremor in her hand as she reached for her wineglass, the quick glance she shared with Richard. There was something beneath her perfect facade, something that made her afraid of me and my family. I didn't know it then, but that dinner was just the beginning. Vivian Caldwell had already decided I was a threat to her carefully curated world, and she was prepared to do whatever it took to protect it. What she didn't know was that I could play that game too. And I had nothing to lose. Calls started the morning after the engagement dinner. First daily, then multiple times a day. Vivian had opinions about everything: the wedding venue, the flowers, even what I should wear to work when meeting Ethan's business associates. I was in the middle of a crucial client presentation when my phone buzzed for the 3rd time that morning. Vivian's name flashed on the screen, making my stomach clench. "Harper, darling," her voice dripped honey when I called her back during lunch. "I've scheduled a tasting at LeBlanc for Saturday. The chef is a personal friend, and he's rarely available for private events." I gripped my desk chair. "This Saturday? Ethan and I already have plans with my parents." "Oh, but surely they'll understand. This is about your future, dear. The right connections are everything in our circle." Our circle. As if I was already part of their world of charity galas and country club memberships. "I'll have to check with Ethan," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I already did. He thinks it's a wonderful idea." But of course he did. I stared at the engagement ring on my finger, remembering how Ethan had promised we'd make decisions together. Later that evening, I confronted him in our kitchen. "You agreed to cancel our plans with my parents without even asking me?" Ethan ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I once found endearing. "Mom's just trying to help, Harper. She knows people we need for the wedding." Need? Or people she wants to impress? Why do you always assume the worst about her? His voice took on that defensive tone I was hearing more often lately. "She's including you in everything." Including me? The more like controlling me. I slammed a cabinet door harder than intended. "Your mother calls me multiple times a day, Ethan. She's trying to micromanage our entire lives. She's excited about the wedding. Can't you just what? Let her run roughshod over everything I want." The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan wouldn't meet my eyes, and suddenly I saw what I'd been trying to ignore. How easily he fell in line with his mother's wishes. How quickly he dismissed my concerns. "I'll tell her to back off a bit," he finally said, but his tone lacked conviction. That night, as Ethan slept peacefully beside me, I lay awake scrolling through my phone. A notification popped up. Vivian had added me to a group chat with her society friends, all discussing the proper way to plan a Caldwell wedding. I turned off my phone, but not before noticing something odd. In one of the photos Vivian shared, there was a familiar face in the background. My father, much younger, shaking hands with Richard Caldwell. What was that about? Ethan's birthday party at the Caldwell estate felt more like a society event than a celebration. I watched from the edge of the grand ballroom as Vivian orchestrated her perfect evening, directing waiters and fussing over flower arrangements that probably cost more than my car. Time for presents. Vivian's voice cut through the murmur of conversation. She gestured for me to step forward, her smile sharp as a knife. "Harper, darling, you first." My heart sank. I'd spent weeks choosing Ethan's gift, a rare first edition of his favorite book, something meaningful rather than flashy. Before I could move, Vivian clapped her hands. "Actually, I have something special for both of you." She nodded to Richard, who wheeled in an easel with a large covered canvas. My father, standing nearby with my mother, tensed visibly. Something in his expression made me uneasy. "For the happy couple," Vivian announced, pulling off the cover with flourish. "An original Monet. Perfect for your new home in the Caldwell Heights development." The room erupted in appreciative gasps. I felt the blood drain from my face. Ethan and I hadn't discussed moving to Caldwell Heights, his family's exclusive neighborhood. "Mother, that's..." Ethan started. "Incredible," Vivian finished. "Well, we can't have our son and his bride living in that tiny downtown apartment, can we?" My father stepped forward, his voice quiet but firm. "Funny how some people think they can buy happiness with money they once had to borrow." The room went silent. Vivian's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. "James," my mother warned softly. "What exactly are you implying?" Richard spoke for the first time that evening, his tone dangerous. I looked between them, remembering that old photo I'd seen. There was history here, something nobody was telling me. "Nothing at all," my father replied, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Just remembering old times. Congratulations on the Monet, kids." Ethan grabbed my hand, squeezing too tight. "Thank you, Mother." "It's perfect." I pulled away, feeling sick. "I need some air." In the garden, I heard footsteps behind me. It was Zoe, my best friend, carrying 2 stolen champagne flutes. "That was intense," she said, handing me a glass. "Your dad looked ready for war back there." "Something's not right," I replied, thinking about the photo, my father's comment, Vivian's reaction. "I need to find out what happened between our families." "Whatever it is," Zoe said, "Vivian's terrified you'll discover it. Did you see her face when your dad spoke up?" I nodded, remembering the flash of fear in Vivian's eyes. For the first time, I realized I might have more power in this situation than I thought. The restaurant I chose for the family meeting was neutral ground, an upscale bistro downtown, away from both the Caldwell's usual haunts and my parents' comfort zone. I arrived early, watching the door like a referee about to start a boxing match. My parents arrived first, my father adjusting his tie nervously. "You sure about this, kiddo?" he asked, kissing my cheek. Before I could answer, the Caldwells swept in. Vivian wore her usual armor of designer clothes and perfectly coiffed hair. Richard's face was unreadable as always. "What a quaint choice," Vivian said, examining the restaurant with barely concealed disdain. The waiter had barely finished taking our orders when Vivian launched her first salvo. "We've been discussing the wedding venue. The country club has an opening next spring." "Actually," I interrupted, "Ethan and I were thinking of something smaller. Maybe the botanical gardens." "The botanical gardens?" Richard's voice cut through the tension. Public venues aren't appropriate for a Caldwell wedding. My father set down his water glass with deliberate care. And what exactly would be appropriate for my daughter's wedding? James, my mother warned softly. No, Susan, I want to hear this. My father leaned forward. What makes your family's wishes more important than ours? Richard's mask finally cracked. Perhaps the fact that we've maintained our social position through generations, while others, his eyes flicked to my father, had to claw their way up from nothing. Temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I watched my father's hands curl into fists under the table. At least I earned everything I have, he replied quietly. Unlike some people who needed help to keep their empire from crumbling. Vivian's wine glass clattered against her plate. That's ancient history. Is it? My father pulled out his phone, showing the same photo I'd seen from Ethan's birthday party. This was taken the day I helped save your family's company, Richard. Or have you conveniently forgotten that? I stared at my father in shock. The Caldwells had needed my family's help? This was the secret? That transaction was strictly business, Richard snapped. Then why hide it? I found myself asking. Why treat us like we're beneath you when? Enough! Vivian stood abruptly. We're leaving. Harper, dear, call me when you're ready to be reasonable about the wedding plans. As they stormed out, I noticed something odd. Richard had left his phone on the table. When I picked it up to return it, a message notification flashed across the screen. Everything set for the company merger. The Winslows won't know what hit them. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about the wedding anymore. They were planning something bigger, something that could destroy my family. I spent the night digging through old business records in my father's home office, my hands trembling as I pieced together the truth. 25 years ago, the Caldwells had been on the brink of bankruptcy. My father, then a rising entrepreneur, had stepped in with a lifeline, a substantial loan and a partnership deal that saved their company. The door creaked open. Harper! My father's voice was soft. It's 3 a.m. Did you know? I held up Richard's phone, showing him the message about the merger. Are they trying to take over your company? He sank into his leather chair, suddenly looking older than I'd ever seen him. I suspected something was brewing. Richard's been buying up shares through shell companies. Why didn't you tell me? Would it have changed how you feel about Ethan? My engagement ring felt heavy on my finger. I don't know who Ethan is anymore. Or if I ever did. My phone buzzed, Ethan calling for the 5th time. I sent it to voicemail. Dad, there's something else. I pulled out an old contract I'd found. This clause here, it gives the Winslows controlling interest if the Caldwells ever attempt a hostile takeover. A small smile crossed my father's face. I always plan for rainy days. But why would they risk? The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The wedding. They're using my marriage to Ethan to neutralize this clause. Once we're married, the families would be legally connected. My father nodded grimly. And Vivian's insistence on rushing the prenup makes more sense now, doesn't it? My phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Vivian. Darling, we simply must finalize the prenup tomorrow. The wedding plans can't proceed without it. I stood up, my decision crystallizing. I need to see Ethan. Harper, my father caught my arm. Be careful. The Caldwells aren't just after money. They want revenge for having to accept our help all those years ago. I found Ethan waiting outside my apartment, looking exhausted. Where have you been? I've been worried sick. Did you know? I showed him the message on his father's phone. About the merger? About what your family is planning. His hesitation told me everything. How long? My voice cracked. How long have you known this whole engagement was just part of their plan? Harper, it's not like that. I love you, but family obligations. Family obligations? I laughed bitterly. Like plotting to destroy my family's company? Like using our marriage as a weapon. His face hardened in a way I'd never seen before, suddenly resembling his father. Sometimes sacrifices have to be made for the greater good. You're right, I said, slipping off my engagement ring. And I'm making mine right now. Caldwell's annual charity gala seemed like the perfect battleground. I walked in wearing my mother's vintage pearl necklace, a stark contrast to the diamonds glittering around me. Vivian had made sure I wasn't on the guest list, but being engaged to Ethan still had its perks. At least for the next few minutes. I spotted Vivian holding court near the champagne fountain, Richard at her side. Their faces fell when they saw me approaching. Harper, Vivian's smile was brittle. This is a private event. Like the private deal you made 25 years ago? I pulled out the old contract, watching their faces pale. The one where my father saved your family from complete ruin? The surrounding conversations died. Richard stepped forward, his voice low. You need to leave. Now. Why? Afraid everyone will learn how the mighty Caldwells built their empire on borrowed money and broken promises. You have no idea what you're talking about, Vivian hissed. Sir. I raised my voice slightly, noting the interested faces turning our way. I know about the shell companies, the planned hostile takeover, using my marriage to void the protection clause. Harper, stop. Ethan appeared beside me, grabbing my arm. You're making a scene. I yanked away from him. That's all you care about, isn't it? Appearances? Just like your parents. You're upset, I understand, Vivian said loudly, playing to our audience. Planning a wedding can be so stressful. There won't be a wedding. I pulled out Richard's phone, holding it up. Not after I found this. Care to explain the merger plans to everyone? Richard's face turned dangerous. That's confidential information. If you breathe a word, you'll what? Destroy my family's company? That was already your plan. Finn stepped between us. Harper, please. We can work this out. Like you worked out using our engagement to help your parents get revenge? My voice cracked. Tell me, Ethan, was any of it real? The silence that followed was deafening. Security, Richard called sharply. Please escort Miss Winslow out. As two men in dark suits approached, I saw Vivian's triumphant smile. But she didn't know about my final move. Before I go, I announced, you should know I've already sent copies of everything. The original contract, the merger plans, the shell company documents, to every major business publication in the city. Color drained from Richard's face. Vivian grabbed her husband's arm for support. You wouldn't, Ethan whispered. You taught me well, I said, meeting Vivian's shocked gaze. Sometimes sacrifices have to be made for the greater good. As security led me out, I heard the whispers starting, saw phones being pulled out. By morning, the Caldwells' carefully constructed facade would crumble. I'd won. So why did victory feel so hollow? The morning after the gala, I found Ethan waiting outside my apartment. Dark circles under his eyes matched the rumpled suit he was still wearing from last night. The story's everywhere, he said, holding up his phone. Stock's already dropping. Dad's calling in every favor he has to contain it. I stepped past him, heading for my car. That's not my problem anymore. Harper, wait. He caught my arm. I know I messed up, but I love you. We can start over, away from all this. For a moment, I almost believed him. Then my phone buzzed, Vivian's number. Take it, Ethan said. She wants to make things right. I answered on speaker. Hello, Vivian. You vindictive little girl. Her voice trembled with rage. Do you have any idea what you've done? Exactly what you taught me. Protecting family at any cost, right? We were going to make you part of our family. No, I said quietly. You were going to use me to save your empire. Again, Ethan reached for the phone. Mother, please. Tell her, Ethan, Vivian cut in. Tell her about the trust fund condition. My stomach dropped. What condition? Ethan wouldn't meet my eyes. If I married someone they approved of by 35, I get control of my trust fund early. Enough to buy controlling shares in your father's company. Pieces clicked into place. So that's why you proposed when you did. To beat the deadline. It wasn't like that at first, he pleaded. But then Mother suggested. That's enough. Richard's voice came through the phone, sharp as a blade. Harper, let's handle this like business people. Name your price. I laughed, the sound hollow even to my ears. You still don't get it. This was never about money. Then what do you want? Vivian demanded. I want you to remember how it felt, being at someone else's mercy, watching everything you built start to crumble. Just like my father could have let you crumble 25 years ago. Silence filled the line. But he didn't, I continued. Because he believed in second chances. Maybe you should think about that. I ended the call, turning to Ethan. His face showed something I'd never seen before, respect, maybe even awe. You're not going to destroy them, he realized. No. The threat is enough. I handed him my engagement ring. But we're done. Some things can't be fixed with second chances. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of him in my rearview mirror, standing alone between two worlds, just like I'd been all those months ago. The difference was I finally knew where I belonged. 6 months later, I stood in my father's office, watching him sign the final paperwork that would protect our company from any future takeover attempts. The headlines about the Caldwell scandal had faded, but the lessons hadn't. You know, my father said, setting down his pen, Richard sent me a letter last week. I froze. What did it say? He pulled an envelope from his desk drawer. See for yourself. The letter was handwritten, something I'd never seen from Richard Caldwell. Dear James, it began. 25 years ago, you showed me mercy when you could have destroyed us. Now your daughter has done the same. Caldwells owe the Winslows a debt that pride prevented us from acknowledging. I'm sorry it took another generation to learn what you tried to teach me about integrity. My hand shook slightly as I read the last line. I've stepped down as CEO. Ethan will take over with the condition that he runs the company his own way, free from his mother's influence. Quite a change, my father said softly. Before I could respond, my assistant knocked. Miss Winslow? Vivian Caldwell is here to see you. She looked different, smaller somehow, without her usual armor of designer clothes and perfect makeup. Harper, she said, her voice lacking its usual sharp edge. I won't take much of your time. What do you want, Vivian? To tell you that you were right. About everything. She twisted her hands together. I was so afraid of losing control, of losing Ethan, that I became exactly what I feared most, someone who destroys families. I thought of all the cutting remarks, the manipulation, the pain. Why tell me this now? Because Ethan is happy, truly happy, running the company his way. And I realized that sometimes letting go is the only way to keep what matters. She paused. He misses you. Vivian, I'm not here to play matchmaker. Just to say that if you ever want to talk to him, he's different now. We all are. After she left, I found one more surprise on my desk, a small package from Ethan. Inside was the vintage book I'd given him for his birthday with a note. Some stories deserve a second draft. When you're ready. I placed the book in my drawer, not quite ready to close it, not quite ready to open it again. Sometimes the best endings are the ones we don't rush into. Zoe called that evening, asking about the rumored changes at Caldwell Industries. So, she said, did you get your revenge? I thought about Richard's letter, Vivian's visit, Ethan's book. No, I replied. I got something better. I got the truth. And sometimes that's enough.